Pitch to Pro is the official podcast of Ozark United FC. This will be our platform to tell our story about the club and the special place that we call home, Northwest Arkansas. This is a journey. We want to bring you along for the ride. We'll share what's going on behind the curtain, help educate the community at large about soccer, our league, and give updates on the progress of the club along the way. Together, we'll explore and unpack our journey to professional soccer, the magic that is NWA, our community, and talk all things soccer from on the pitch to behind the scenes, telling the story of our club. Pitch to Pro podcast is proudly sponsored by podcastvideos.com. Podcastvideos.com is Northwest Arkansas's premier podcast recording studio. Equipped with industry-leading equipment, the recording studio and services save you time, money, and hassle. They are dedicated to helping you create, record, and publish high-quality podcasts for your audience. Be sure to check them out today at podcastvideos.com. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Pitch to Pro podcast. I'm your host, Managing Director for Ozark United FC. God, it feels so good to say that again. I know we did it in the previous episode, but it's still fresh, so I love saying it. Again, Northwest Arkansas's professional soccer club playing in the United Soccer League. We've got an awesome conversation on deck for you guys today with one of the best in the biz. Here to join me, Mr. Brett Johnson, owner of Rhode Island FC and Ipswich Town in the Premier League. Brett, thank you so much for coming on to the show. I really appreciate your time, man.
Thank you, my friend. It's a real honor, as always.
Well, Brett, before we jump in, can you guys just talk a little bit about your background and give people a little bit of perspective on kind of you and kind of maybe how you got into soccer?
Yeah, as I highlight, certainly my athletic career wasn't through my athletic career. I was a very modest player growing up in New York City. As I said, I don't know too many professionals that came out of Central Park, but I always loved the sport. And then after graduating from college, I eventually found myself based in London and traveling around the world. And as I like to say, I really had a front row seat to the Premier League. And everywhere I traveled around this beautiful world of ours, I recognized that the real global religion is football, meaning soccer. Yeah. And so it was that time overseas that gave me the epiphany that at some point, the United States was going to catch up in terms of passion for the beautiful game. And then certainly the United States, from my perspective, would catch up, both men and women in terms of our ability to compete on a global stage. The women, as everyone knows, have always been kind of world class. But I continue to maintain that U.S. men, at some point, I believe strongly, we have the potential to win the World Cup. It hasn't happened, but I think with this latest managerial change, which now has probably got the right guy at the helm, and we certainly have enough talent. It's just a question: can we bring it all together? So, anyway, long answer to your question. But I've been very passionate about seeing the beautiful game grow in the United States. And then ultimately what really led to where I am now is I saw an opportunity exactly a decade ago where I recognized that Phoenix, Arizona didn't have a Major League Soccer franchise. That was my first epiphany. And then that opened up the door for me to recognize United Soccer League and start to see what I consider to be the outstanding benefits of the right USL franchise in the right market.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I totally agree with you, by the way. I think we got the right guy at the helm, and we absolutely have the talent here in our athletics. It's all around the infrastructure and the structures underneath and building the right culture and processes and getting it to the final stages. And, hopefully we make a deep run in 2026 because that's just going to be a massive springboard for the sport, as we all know. And it already is in terms of what the buildup has been in the other tournaments itself. But, you mentioned Phoenix. So let's start there. You saw the opportunity. You built, the team there and talk a little bit about that and what was the opportunity and how did that come to fruition? And what did you guys do well there? Talk a little bit about that journey in Phoenix, because to be honest, it's still one of the more successful franchises in USL today. Right. So you helped lay the foundation for that and they continue to build on it.
Yeah. So I originally bought the predecessor club, which was called Arizona United. And we were playing initially in a baseball stadium in downtown Scottsdale and doing well, drawing good crowds. we lost our lease and we had to pivot. And the only place I could find was about an hour outside of Scottsdale in a suburb called Peoria. And that became a real challenge. We lost our fan base, and it really dawned on me that I needed to bring in new partners. I'm based in Los Angeles, so I really need to find some Phoenix-based partners. And the most important thing was I recognized we had to get out of, for a lot of reasons, a baseball stadium. And I always joke about, one day, if I ever aspire to write a book on professional soccer ownership, it'll be the shortest book ever. As I describe it, it's location, location, location. I mean, if you have the right location, you can do great things. If you have the wrong location, if you're in the wrong type of facility, no one can bend the laws of those economic challenges. So the big shift for Phoenix Rising was bringing in a handful of just outstanding partners: Berkay Bakai, Mark Detmer, Tim Reister, David Rappaport. We got a very good general manager in Bobby Dooley. Anyway, they deserve a disproportionate amount of credit for where the club ultimately ended up. I mean, Berkay was the one who recruited Didier Drogba to join a USL third division men's team. Almost unheard of, in my opinion. But it was a combination between us building a modular stadium in a great location through a great partnership with one of the Indian tribes in the Phoenix area. And we built this stadium in a record time. It was like 50 days. And literally and figuratively put football on the map in that very competitive sports market. And then Didier Drogba took it to a whole nother level and, started selling out and, doing all the requisite things you need to do, winning sort of on and off the pitch. And so, I've used the success of Phoenix Rising to parlay it into now an equity stake and a board seat at Ipswich Town, now in the Premier League. And then I've been very focused for the last 6 years on Rhode Island. In a prior life, I went to school in Rhode Island. And I just kind of recognized over time what I kind of characterize as the superior economics of the right USL franchise in the right market with the right stadium, which I feel strongly Rhode Island is a very good example of that.
Well, Brett, thank you so much for giving that background on Phoenix. And I still remember when you talked about the coup that was bringing Didier Drogba into your team and ownership group. And I agree. That was unbelievable. It was akin to, what David Beckham did for Major League Soccer in many regards and in different aspects, right? And I still remember watching highlights. That's when I started to see highlights of USL in more mainstream when they had a name that people recognized, right? And I still remember one free kick goal that was like his top highlight or whatever, from like 30 or 40 out. It was wild. So, that's great. You talked a little bit about modular facility and the modular stadium. Can you give people, from your perspective, what that is? We start seeing these crop up in the past few years and maybe decade, proof of concept throughout our league, others. Talk a little bit about that. What did you learn there? Anything that you would have done differently maybe, but just wanted to hear your experience with the modular facility and what that was allowed you guys to do.
No, I think the right modular facility is a game changer. You don't have anyone who goes through the venue who doesn't feel that it's first class. Again, the ability, anyone who's gone to what I'll call these temporary concerts or sporting events, if you've been to, a good example is the Phoenix Open, Waste Management Open, that golf tournament. And, they set those stands up for a week or whatever it might be, but no one goes to that event and doesn't have a first class time. No, the quality of the modular construction is fantastic. And so we took that technology, we built, as I said, in 50 days. I think the original size of the stadium was under like 8,000 seats. And then the quality of the pitch is fantastic. And so the overall experience for our fan base, getting out of a baseball club and putting baseball park and putting this stadium in a great location, that literally and figuratively put Phoenix Rising on the map. And that was the catalyst to get Didier Drogba sign on to the project. So by no means did we sort of invent the concept of building a modular stadium. I mean, as I like to say, Warren Smith and Sac Republic, with what they did, was a good example to me. Like Warren was a real mentor to me, remains a mentor to me in this broader space. But early days, I really looked at what he was doing in Sacramento Republic and recognized that I had to take a page from that playbook, literally and figuratively. But so again, just to put the finer point on a modular stadium, it's a world-class experience, both as a player and a fan. It's a lot less expensive, and it allows ownership groups to get the requisite attraction while they build the appropriate support to look at considering a far more substantial stadium.
And it also provides some flexibility and adaptability, right? I think even in Phoenix, you guys, the club has moved it and, been able to do that, which you obviously, especially from a financial standpoint, very helpful. And, you can't do that with a brick and mortar facility.
That's
without, and so it helped provide that for you guys. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Now the team is located in downtown Phoenix, right near Sky Harbor Airport, in a partnership with the city of Phoenix. And so, yeah, the modular element of it allowed the flexibility to pick it up and move it. And so I think that for ownership groups, that optionality, if you will, provides the added flexibility to kind of keep doors open, as opportunities arise, in other geographical areas. And again, as I said, you want to try to optimize long-term in terms of the right location. I mean, again, if case study after case study can highlight how challenging it is for sports teams that take in a stadium or arena deal that's just in a bad location. I mean, the example I've been using lately has been the NHL team, the Phoenix Coyotes, that just folded. They moved to Glendale, I don't know when it was, let's say a decade ago, and it literally just it ultimately led to the demise of the team. It could never recover from that. It was not where the fan base was for, however many nights a year, 60 plus that the NHL plays at home. For that fan base to try to get to Glendale, they literally and figuratively started to check out. And then ultimately they tried to get something done in Tempe. They couldn't get it done. And now I think they've relocated to Utah, if I understand correctly. But again, it's a perfect example from what I said, that where ownership groups, I think, sometimes have a myopic approach to someone throws them the right deal, and they look at that and they clouds their vision to kind of recognizing that, maybe it's a short-term gain, but it's a long-term loss.
Yeah. And I think, to your point, just to kind of hit it again, is location, right? It's just so important. And we've seen it over and over again. And you just gave a latest example, but there's multiple others, right? Throughout sports, either successfully or, the other way, and having to pivot one way or another. And that is something that, at least in the Phoenix example, allowed the ownership group to make that decision and move into different locations that maybe work a little bit better for them. But, you hope that you get into the right situation, but that is one thing that these modular facilities do allow for if you need to pivot and make a change. So that's something that was interesting for me, jumping in here. We share in the mentorship of Mr. Warren Smith, so phenomenal individual. But I appreciate you giving that insight into the time there and what the team did really well and how they built that fan base. It's still one of the better clubs in the league today, and coming off the back of a couple of great seasons as well on the pitch.
Yeah, I was very proud. They, obviously won the championship last season, and tremendous odds. And in fact, of all the seasons that I was involved with the club, I think the odds were probably the furthest away from us getting a championship. It's just funny, that's why we love sports. It's just
Yeah.
Some years we have teams that can't lose and we don't find a way to do it in the offseason. And other times we have a team that's really struggling to win and it somehow puts it all together at the right time. So, no, that was fantastic, because anyone who's been involved with sports will recognize, you've got to cherish every single win. None of this stuff is easy. None of this stuff's for the faint of heart. And it almost takes as much money, time, and effort to put a mediocre or poor performing team on the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you've starting to hit on that. I think it'll bring up one of my next questions here in a minute. But let's talk a little bit about, you just talked about nearly a decade ago, almost a decade ago exactly. So you've been in the league now, by those standards, a while, right? We're still a young league, but you've been around for, almost the majority, at least of the current iteration, right?
Yeah. I'm rapidly becoming the old man in the room.
You and Warren, right? The OGs, the godfathers of the league, right?
So a handful of other.
And you're now on your second USL club, if I'm not mistaken, here with Rhode Island. And talk a little bit about the growth of the league, and we'll talk about Rhode Island in a little bit. But talk about the growth, if you could, just since your time in the league. What have you seen? How has the league changed? For the better and continuing to grow in your eyes.
Yeah, I think that the last decade, it's been extraordinary to see the growth of USL. I think John Neese is another individual that, obviously for those that don't know, but John Neese really leads the Louisville club, and he's another mentor. He's another incredible light in this industry. And so, apologies, I must have the same Arkansas allergies as you do, but Warren and what he started to do with Sac Republic, and then I think the next stage for me was seeing what John and the Louisville ownership group were doing there. They had a very successful club. They were partnered up, I think, with University of Louisville, one of the local schools, I believe. They were playing in Swan Stadium, or anyway. But when they put a flag in the ground and built their own soccer-specific stadium, that changed everything. And then you could look at Colorado Springs, and I really like that ownership group as well. The Reagan family is fantastic. I think that's a great example of a franchise that was struggling, tough location that they were playing in originally. It seemed like be either a rented high school stadium or something. I mean, again, I only saw it on television. But now you look at this world-class soccer-specific stadium in downtown Colorado Springs, and I think Colorado now has gone from being one of the laggards in the league to one of the leaders in the league overnight. So it says everything in terms of what the right stadium does with the right ownership group, with the right market. And so I guess segueing to Rhode Island, my wife's from Connecticut, right across the border from Rhode Island. I went to Brown University a lifetime ago, but spent some time in the state, and I was very quick when I heard the news that the baseball team was picking up and leaving to go to Worcester, Massachusetts. I was very quick to recognize, as I describe it, sort of the entrepreneurial opportunity. I called Alec Papadakis up and bought the rights to USL in Rhode Island. I flew in and met with the governor. I met with the mayor. I have an incredible partner who deserves a disproportionate amount of credit for a lot of what we've done in Rhode Island. I mean, he's the one who's really blocked and tackled to get the stadium on the precipice of being completed, on and everything else that we're going to do there. So, kind of fast forwarding, I think Rhode Island's now hopefully becoming a good proxy to other USL markets in terms of what the art of the possible is. I think to our credit, unlike Louisville or Colorado that had existing teams, I mean, this is an expansion club in an expansion state. So the degree of difficulty, I would argue, is a little bit higher. But I'm really, really proud of the partnership that we have with the state of Rhode Island, with the city of Pawtucket. I'm really proud of the ownership group that we pulled together. And then the world-class stadium that we're about 6 months away from opening, I think will help to take USL to a whole nother level. And I think hopefully, again, becomes a catalyst and an inspiration for a lot of other outstanding ownership groups New Mexico's obviously working on their deal. Oakland's doing a lot of groundwork in terms of different options there. Yep. There are a bunch of great expansion leagues coming in. You guys are a perfect example of it. Jacksonville as well. So I think as great as the last 10 years have been, I get really excited about what I think the next 10 years portends for the greater league and for soccer in North America, and for what I think increasingly is a fan base that really recognizes the attraction of USL, of a well-run USL team with young, dynamic players that are going to have very, very bright futures. And a lot of them are starting or getting their quality starts in the USL.
No, that's fantastic insight. I think well put, in terms of kind of the development of the league and these stadiums being a big part of that growth, and the right ownership groups getting the right people together in the right markets. And that's the mix, and trying to get that right. And you've seen these turnarounds, to your point, and just how important these stadiums are, to your point, again, location, right? And the experience that it provides. You hit on something earlier, and I know it's a topic that you get asked about a lot, in terms of the future, and something that you're experiencing now on the good end, with Ipswich, which is every game matters, was your comment a few minutes ago in our in our conversation. Do you think a lot of listeners, pro rel is ever a possibility in the United States?
Absolutely. And I think if I and a bunch of others have anything to do with it, then we'll see that day realized. There's nothing like pro rel. There's nothing like games of consequence. Yeah. And so I think USL has within its grasp a pathway to adopt it. And I think USL should. I think USL has got the potential to truly stand out and differentiate itself in the North American soccer landscape through the adoption of pro rel. I think USL is rapidly becoming, as I describe it, the best development league in the world, giving better quality minutes to young players in front of bigger audiences. I mean, I try to say this all the time. What MLS is doing is fantastic. Lionel Messi, that's exciting stuff. God bless them all. The LAFC in my backyard, Austin, Columbus, great stadiums, great soccer cultures. Like, I'm a fan of the sport writ large. I'm all in on USL, and with that in mind, I think the prospect of USL adopting pro rel gets very, very exciting. I love the fact that USL now has a women's league. I'm very interested in launching a women's team in Rhode Island. So, as I think about, what I would call the future passion for this sport, I think big crowds coming out to support USL clubs, both on the men and women, giving quality minutes to young players, is a competitive advantage that USL has to press forward with. And I saw recently, it was literally yesterday, someone had posted on LinkedIn, I think it was a player in the MLS Next Pro that won the Golden Boot Award. And outstanding player, by the way. And there's the talent that's playing in MLS Next Pro, the talent that's playing USL. It's fantastic. It should give anyone, confidence in terms of what's going on, I think, in this country. But what struck me about watching the highlights, it was like 6 different goals. Every single stadium was completely empty. I mean, not like had like 100 fans, had 0 fans. Yeah. And so, look, I think that's a real challenge. I don't think a development league that doesn't have any fans is a true development league. And that's where I feel like USL, when you look at what Louisville's pulling and New Mexico's pulling, and keep going down the list, Rhode Island now in our first year at a Bryant University, not our stadium. Wait till we move into our stadium next year. So I think getting 8,000 to 10,000 fans on a regular basis, and switching to Ipswich, we have an incredible academy. We have a lot of talent, as every single English club does. But that talent is playing their counterparts, but they're also playing in front of 5 coaches on one side and 5 coaches on another side. And so as anyone who's played or watched sports, that environment that's not the crucible by which professionals are really developed. You need the pressure of converting a penalty kick in front of 10,000 friends or 10,000 foes. And that
Yep.
really, you can't replicate that. And the reality is MLS teams can't give quality minutes to young American players like USL does. They're not doing it. They have a different business model. They're trying to compete with the Premier League. And I wish them the best on that. That's not a game I would want to take on if I were that's why I far prefer USL, where I feel, again, we have the ability where multi-club ownerships are going to look at the states, want to have a foothold here, and recognize what I'll call the superior element of a USL ownership vis-a-vis other options.
Yeah. You hit a lot of good things that we're going to talk about in part 2, but quickly, I want to thank you for bringing up the women opportunity and what the USL has done, and kudos to that entire team for the launch so far. It's been incredible to watch. And frankly, it's needed. I mean, I think at the time that they launched, there were 94 or close to 100 professional men's teams in the United States. And if we include the 2 expansion teams in NWSL, before the Super League launched in the USL, there were only 14 clubs with 23, 25 roster spots on them.
Yep.
I mean, and there's 40,000, women's college soccer players across all, sanctioned divisions. Just so needed to help provide that opportunity and help bridge that gender gap.
Yeah.
And so it's needed. And we have, to your earlier point, world dominance in our history, right? 4 World Cups, I believe, on the women's side. And so to, be that far behind the men, I think it's just about time, man. And I think the reaction that you're seeing from the league, I can't wait to help be a part of that here in our market. I know you said you're really excited about that prospect in Rhode Island. And so I just wanted to give them that airtime and just say, fantastic job. And, can't wait to see it continue to grow.
Yeah. I mean, again, just specifically, I talk about this increasingly a lot, is that I'm very focused on what I'm now referring to as a stadium as an asset class. That when you have the right stadium in the right location, then the ability to program men's sports, women's sports, professional sports, collegiate sports, amateur sports, concerts. So USL, the fact that it now has a Division I sanctioned women's league, same level of sanctioning as the NWSL, that's a game changer. And so when I look at my Rhode Island project, the fact that I can put together an ownership group that'll be very deep-pocketed and passionate and committed to this women's team as an added complement to what we're doing on the men's side, as an added complement to what we're programming into the stadium. And as anyone who's kind of studied men's and women's sports, it's a different fan base by and large. It's a different corporate sponsor by and large. So any of the case studies that people pay attention to, if you look at Angel City here in my backyard in LA, it's incredible what they've done. And that is very much a different consumer to LAFC. There's very little overlap between the LAFC fan base and the Angel City. And that's really, really exciting. But again, I think a lot of it comes down to world-class facility. I mean, I don't know if enough attention has been spent or focused on the fact that as great as Angel City is, and they're great, if they were playing in the Rose Bowl, it's a very different outcome right now. If you're playing in a 100,000 seat venue, and even if you pull 20,000 fans, that's not a good experience. But playing in LAFC in a great location, in a great soccer-specific stadium with 22,000 seats that they're selling out every game, that's a totally different experience. So again, that's why I get really excited about Rhode Island, because we're going to have a world-class stadium in a great location that's specific to football, to soccer. And so the women who play there and the fans that come will enjoy that experience about as much as anything. And it's really, really tough to pencil out all this stuff just on one team. It's said differently. Not everyone's going to be able to do what the Kansas City Current did. It's
exactly.
It's really going to be tough to do it. And again, that's where game-changing element for a lot of USL ownership groups is you get to double the nights in your stadium fairly quickly, and you get to dramatically increase your customer base, your corporate sponsorship base, your merchandise sales, et cetera. And it's just the right thing to do. And it really is a fun game to watch. I love watching women's football. And I've been very pleased as well. Ipswich has got a women's team that's doing well, which we're interested in continuing to see grow, et cetera. So this is the right time for women's sports, and long may it continue. And if I have anything to do with it, it will.
Awesome. Well, Brett, I think we'll leave it there for part 1, and we'll pick it back up in part 2. Thanks so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
What an honor. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Pitch to Pro. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to tune in for part 2 of my conversation with Mr. Brett Johnson on the next episode. Until then, cheers, Northwest Arkansas. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Pitch to Pro podcast. Be sure to tune in again in 2 weeks for the next installment. And check out the Stoppage Time series for a recap of today's episode. Be sure to find us at Pitch to Pro on YouTube, Instagram, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Until next time, Northwest Arkansas, cheers.